Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and tonight I want to welcome Steve and Schnee to the channel. Tonight we are looking at the Warner Brothers catalog of one of my favorite artists, Marshall Crenshaw. So Steve's here, Steve's ready. This is a great conversation. Let's go.
Grant is changing the world one track at a time on Grant's Rock Warehouse.
Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and tonight I want to welcome Steve and Schnee back to the show. It's always good to have Steven back to the show because, you know, we talk about such great music and such great artists. Yes. Tonight we are, and I'm just going to tilt this up so you can see it. There you go, right there. Promo poster Marshall Crenshaw. We are going to be talking some Marshall Crenshaw tonight, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep.
And we are primarily going to we might touch on some of those later records, but I think, me personally, I think that golden period is those Warner Brothers years. So I thought Steven should be here. We could talk some Marshall Crenshaw and talk about those Warner Brothers records.
Yeah, you see, I think like he's continued to make great albums since then, but that would end up being a 2 or 3 hour show, I think.
Right.
You know, going through the catalog. So we're going to focus on those 5 Warner Brothers albums.
So anyway, Marshall Crenshaw, born 1953 in Detroit. If anybody knows this about him, he really got his start in the Broadway. I guess it was on Broadway.
I think he was a touring thing.
He was on the touring version of Beatlemania, and he played John Lennon. Now, I'm not sure what years those were, but that kind of got his. Well, he also was in a lot of bands. I know he was like. I've read some things about Marshall. I know he was in some high school bands that were really good. And I think he just kind of stood out amongst the, you know, people knew that there was something special with him.
Well, I think in Beatlemania, I think that he was in one of the touring units with a guy named Tom Teely. And I think Tom maybe played George. And Tom had an album that came out in the 80s. But it was a very different. It wasn't power pop, whatever. It was just a great, I'd say somewhere between, it's not really synth pop, but kind of like AOR and new wave. So if anybody can track that album down, never came out on CD, but he's a good artist. Tom Teely.
We'll check that out. We will be talking about this, but his brother, Robert Crenshaw, is the drummer on most of these Warner Brothers records. And he has put out some solo stuff too. Steve and I have talked about it. I have never heard it. There you go. Well, what do you got? Share with the class what you've got.
Well, the ones I may have left one on the shelf. There's one called Friends, Families, and Neighbors.
Okay.
There's one called just self-titled. See, and his voice is very similar to Marshall's.
I've seen that record. I've never
heard the one you've seen?
I remember seeing it when it came out.
Yeah, his voice is similar to Marshall's, maybe the same range. I'm not sure. These are really, really good albums. I mean, you know, you think to yourself, oh, he's the drummer. It's like, no, he's a Crenshaw.
Yeah.
You know, and there's another one there.
Very nice. Yeah, I don't know that record.
And then Victory Songs. You can probably find these on, I think he might have a website. He also wrote a book. And that covers all the years with Marshall Crenshaw. So he tells a lot of behind the scenes tales and stuff.
I should pick that up.
Yeah. I think you can get it through. Well, first off, the book was created for sort of like an interactive thing. So like, you know, online you would read or maybe on Kindle or something like that, you would read it. Then he'd have a link to the thing he's talking about. Like he'd say something like, oh, we recorded it, you know, Hit Factory or whatever. Then you can click a link and then it'll take you to like, you can read about Hit Factory. And the book that you can get through Amazon, you know, it's one of the things where Amazon prints it up. You can get that, but of course you can't click the links in the book. So I'd recommend if you want a more interactive thing, maybe check out Robert Crenshaw's book. I think that Eric Stewart from 10cc did that as well.
Cool. Yeah, I remember I think the first time I got turned on to Marshall Crenshaw, I think might have been on Night Flight. I'm pretty sure they played like a show from him back early. This had to be 82, maybe. I remember he was playing an Epiphone electric. can't remember what model number was, but I was like, oh, wow, look at that Epiphone. And I was just totally taken by it. So I went out and got the first album, saw Marshall on the field day tour. So, and I've told this story before. So Marshall opened, and then it was the Tubes, and then it was Hall & Oates. It was
Wow.
absolutely phenomenal. It was an outdoor show.
What a show. Yeah.
Outdoor show. The Tubes are fabulous. Marshall Crenshaw was fabulous. And the way they set up the stage, Steve, is that they put Marshall and the band. It was just a three-piece,
Yeah.
you know, and they
Yeah.
were
So,
right
so it was
on
Marshall.
the edge of the stage.
Yeah. So it was Marshall Crenshaw, Robert Crenshaw, and a bass player named Chris Donato.
Yep. Fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. And Marshall was playing one of those weird Gibson Thunderbird guitars, the ones that have like a built-in guitar stand. And I thought, God, where am I ever going to see another a Guild Thunderbird, for crying out loud? I'd never seen one before, but it was cool. They sounded great, and they hardly had any room to play, but because they were set up right in front of the Tubes.
Yeah.
Can you
Right.
imagine everything that the Tubes had?
Yeah.
And then Hall & Oates. And Hall & Oates, it was the H2O tour.
I got into Marshall sort of a indirect way. I was a big Robert Gordon fan.
Mm-hmm.
My brother, my friend Rickenfeld, and me. We heard Robert Gordon through Rick, and then I was a big fan of Robert Gordon, especially his single "Someday, Some Way" or the song.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found out a guy named Marshall Crenshaw had written it, and then there at Licorice Pizza, I'm flipping through the bins, and I see this album. And I go, oh my God, that's the guy who wrote Someday, Some Way. Turn around, second song on the album. And I immediately had to have it because I thought if he could write one good song like that, there's got to be another couple good songs on the album. Little did I know, 40 years later, or 40 something years later, I'm still talking about Marshall Crenshaw. And it's interesting because, Marshall's touring currently as we speak. And one of my friends, Derek Anderson, who's a really talented guy, is playing bass for him. But I would never ask Derek to get me into the show or anything. I don't ask friends for that kind of stuff.
Right.
I just sit home and wait for the phone to ring and say, oh, is it Derek? Oh, no, it's not.
Oh, it's not Derek.
No, it's Grant.
Darn it. Oh, it's Grant calling again. Wants something. But first album, oh my God. Well, I can already tell you that I think it's a masterpiece. What a way to come out swinging. Because every tune is great. Everything is, well, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, before we talk about that first album, because I do want you to get into it, I want to bring up this CD. It came out later. It's called The 9-Volt Years. And this is basically a collection of like demos and stuff leading up to the first album. He re-recorded some of these songs for the album, but this is where You're My Favorite Waste of Time comes from.
I think wasn't that the B-side of Someday?
It was the B-side of, no, it was the B-side
Girl?
of the first single off of the second album. What was that? Whenever You're on My Mind.
Yeah.
I think it was the B-side of that, but you could be right actually. But it's that recording, and this is a collection of demos that they had recorded before the first album, and this I believe led to them being signed. And then of course, as Grant said, go ahead and wax poetic. What an album!
Mm-hmm. Great.
Just
Someday, Some Way. I mean, that's his signature song, no doubt. Catchy, great. I mean, it's a perfect pop song.
It is.
You could even compare it to probably maybe the Beatles to some degree. I mean, in that the level of songwriting. I mean, I wouldn't change anything about it. The whole record, Cynical Girl, The Usual Thing, the whole record, Steve, for me, it's a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
And I've loved it ever since I've heard it. But there are other records I like too, but for some reason, right now we're still in the early 80s, so you're not really taking in a lot of that 80s studio production. This, to me, it sounds still very 70s to me, and it's not all glossy. It's a little bit raw, but everything shines on this record for me.
Yeah. I mean, in 1982 when this came out, where else were you hearing something influenced by the Beatles and Buddy Holly and Roy Orbison and, classic rock and roll records? This wasn't something, dipping back to krautrock or something. This is something that was, by listening to this, he didn't sound like the Beatles or Buddy Holly or anybody like that, but you knew what his influences were because they were sort of subliminal influences. You just go, oh, he has that, I don't know, sort of like a John Lennon-y thing or whatever. It was just naturally flowing out of him. It was just really incredible. And the band was well rehearsed because the band was really tight. Richard Gotterer produced the album, and he's produced a lot of great records, going back to, even just a few years before this. I think one of the reasons I got excited when I saw this was Marshall Crenshaw, that I saw Richard Gotterer produced it. It's because I'm a big Yachts fan, and he had produced the first Yachts album, amongst a lot of other things, Blondie and everything like that. But that was another thing that sold me on this record. Oh, this guy wrote Someday, Some Way, and it's produced by the same guy who produced the first Yachts album. But no, this is just a stellar. Now, a couple different versions have come out on CD. And there was the regular version that came out on Warner Brothers. Then this version came out on Warner Archive, which I think, Warner Archive and Rhino. And this has bonus tracks on it.
Yeah, I've got that.
And then it was reissued through Yep Rock with a different cover, same session, with different bonus tracks on it. So
I've got that.
Yeah, and this is it's just an incredible album. I mean, I say you need both of them. I'm not going to say you need this because it has these certain bonus tracks or this because it has these certain bonus tracks. You need both of them because they have different covers, and it's so good. You need to play it twice each time.
I agree 100%. So also Yep Rock also produced Field Day. They put a version of that out. So I don't know.
We will get to that.
We'll get to there, but I don't know if there's any more plans to reissue any of those records or not. I haven't heard anything else about it. Have you?
No, neither have I. No.
I thought that they would just continue on, which I wish they would.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the first album, we talked about the tracks. It's a 10 out of 10 record for me.
Yeah, it is. It's
absolutely brilliant.
One of the best albums of 1982. One of the best. See, here's the thing about, and I find this about a lot of power pop artists. When I think of power pop, I don't think of Marshall Crenshaw, although he's power pop. Everything about that album is power pop. But to me, it's just great pop rock. It's Americana. Mm-hmm. It's rock and roll. And it's just everything that I love about music, which is melody and harmonies and there's a feeling from Marshall Crenshaw albums that you can tell he's not going through the motions. It's coming from a real place. Mm-hmm. And I love that about music too, when you can feel it as well as hear it. And that first Marshall Crenshaw album, ooh la la.
Ooh la la. So like I said, I saw him on the Field Day tour in 83. And Field Day was released in 83. This record was produced by Steve Lillywhite. This is kind of controversial because a lot of people critique Steve Lillywhite for the production. Now, I've never had a problem with the production on this record. I say this record goes hand in hand with the debut in my eyes. It's got Whenever You're on My Mind, absolutely stunning track. You're My Favorite Waste of Time.
No, that was a B-side.
Well, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
It came out, it did come out as a B-side. But think about it. I wish it was it should have been on the record. Maybe you know more about that. Why was that just thrown to be a B-side? There's no studio version of that track. And that's
apart from the demo.
Songs. Yeah.
That's a demo. You mean there's no proper studio?
No.
I have no idea why. It could be that they tried getting it down, tried to get in a group, or it could be, artists being artists. Mm-hmm. They could, he could have just thought, oh, it's not one of my best. Whereas all of us are going, holy moly, just listen to that.
When I saw him play in '83, Steve, he played it live.
Oh, really?
And I was captivated because I thought it was
Interesting.
phenomenal. And then I'm going to say, what is this track? You know, because I don't
Mhm.
think any of that stuff, I didn't have like the 45 or anything. I just had the album stuff, but it's just yeah, they played it.
Right.
Phenomenal.
See, well, you see, I'm one of the people that stands there, or that's in the that I'm not a big fan of the production. I love Lily White's production, but Lily
Yeah.
White needs he's better at producing big bands, not trios. You know, I'm talking quartet, quintet, sextet, whatever. Um, because there's so much going on. With this, I felt that everything got drowned together.
Mm.
But the thing that saves it, the musicianship, Marshall's voice, the songs, the harmonies, all that stuff is still there. So I can't fault this album at all. I can say that I wish that Goddard had produced it, or that somebody had gone in and remixed it from Lily White's production. But it does sound a little bit better on the remaster. See, this cover, as far as I know, Marshall did not like that cover.
No,
I mean, look,
he hated it. He hated it.
this totally looks like he's standing next to him, Mrs. Peterson, can I have the hall pass? I have to go potty. And totally sounds like that, or I mean, looks like that. But this here from the same session, it looks right there. That's the album cover it should have been. And of course, there's a picture on the back as well. I sit here and I tell you that the production put me off. But over the years, like I said, the main thing that saves it is the things I talked about, the songs, the performance. Marshall's voice has a purity about it, an honesty about it. And there's also a sense of wonder in his voice too. You can tell that he's loving what he's doing. I mean, he's not roaring and growling or anything like that, but you could just tell there's just a joy and a passion behind what the band was doing, and you could tell it in Chris Donato and Robert Crenshaw as well.
Yep.
They were on a roll. They were.
Yeah, there's no sophomore slump here. Me personally, I'm going to go on a ledge. I'm going to go out there on the branch.
I'm about ready to push you.
Every bit as good, well as the first run. I give it a 10. Me personally, the songs, I don't find anything weaker with this release. I think it's just as strong, and I don't mind Steve Lillywhite. I'm a big fan of Steve Lillywhite overall. And I think what he did here was fine. I don't have a problem with the drum sound or it being cluttered or anything. The songs on here, Steve, are so great that it'd be hard to mar it with production. And I don't mind anything that Steve Lillywhite's done on this record. That's just me.
Sorry to everybody that I'm off of center here on the screen, but I have to keep dodging. Every time the wind blows, the curtains open a little bit, and the light gets in my face. But which is the first Marshall album you heard?
The debut.
Okay.
Because I saw him on Night Flight. And
that's right. And then you got the album.
I had to get it.
And then you saw him during the field day tour.
Yeah,
okay.
I think that performance was released though, and I can't remember what it was called. Oh God, Steve, it's been years since I saw it.
Yeah,
but that's where I'm pretty sure. When I grew up, there was not a whole lot of outlet for visual. We didn't have MTV until much later.
Right.
By the time that I was even, I was away at college by the time I got MTV. And we never got it in small town Marion, Ohio. But Night Flight was one of those programs that changed my life because
absolutely,
they play the entirety. Russ Never Sleeps.
Yep.
All kinds of stuff. And when I was a kid, you probably did the same thing. You're probably glued to it because it was so great. They play new wave theater.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Holy crap! One of the greatest programs ever. Peter
Yeah,
Ivers, the
yeah.
host. New
Over
way
here somewhere,
forward.
I have a Peter Ivers CD
Mhm.
from Wounded Bird.
But great, Peter Ivers, great. Now we're on a tangent. But Marshall Crenshaw would
We're
appear
always on
on
a
nine.
tangent.
We're on a tangent, but Marshall Crenshaw would appear, and it's just I was hooked.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I don't know. I think we've talked about Field Day enough. I think we can definitely recommend it.
Yes. 1985. Then, darn sun. Why
That's
did
right.
the good Lord invent the sun?
I can hear you just right there.
Okay. 1985 came Downtown.
Yeah.
Now, to me, this was a different beast. With the first two albums, there was that energy of the three of them.
Mm-hmm.
This album, a bunch of great songs, but it seemed like the label saying, it, again, this is just me thinking, the label saying, hey, we need more hits. Let's expand you. Let's bring in T-Bone Burnett. Let's get bring in more musicians, make it more rootsy. And I'll tell you, it may not have the feel of the first two albums. I mean, both Robert and Chris Donato play on this, but there's a lot more going on. But Blues is King is one of my favorite Marshall songs ever. Oh my. And there's so many great songs on this album. I mean, Little Wild One actually got played on KROQ. That's the song you would hear from this, and also Blues is King. But so many great songs on this. It's more rootsy than it is power pop. I think that the first two albums, if people are going to classify Marshall Crenshaw as power pop, like I said, I don't. But those are the two albums. This one here is more rootsy. It's moving more into the Americana, but it's still great pop, and he just sounds absolutely wonderful on it. So Downtown was from 1985.
Yeah, a lot more polished.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree. I think Warner Brothers is probably saying, well, why don't we get someone else in here? Maybe try it. I don't know. I have no, I can't prove that. But T-Bone Burnett,
great producer,
great musician, fabulous. Yeah. I don't have a problem what he brought to this record. It's much more polished. I think they're trying to get a hit because we had two records. And I don't know how well they sold. They probably, I think Field Day ended up in the cut-up ends, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they're trying to get something out of Marshall. And I know they think that, well, this guy could, if we do exactly what we think we need to be doing with him, we can get big hits out of this guy. And, if you even look at the cover, Steve, it looks way more corporate, much more. Yeah, it's kind of screams to me, well, we're changing it a little bit. Marshall looks pretty he looks pretty slick there.
The album was lacking the urgency of the first two albums. This was a more relaxed album. Yeah. More take your time, and lots more space in it. Whereas with the trio format, it's like everything, it was real urgent, real exciting. With this, it's more like, okay, let's let the songs breathe a little bit. And still a bunch of great songs, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but it's like totally different.
Yeah.
It's very different from the other two records. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. It's still great. A lot more polished. Do you feel that this is maybe a transitional album to some degree?
I do. I mean, I feel that Downtown is an album that that he was bound to make, but I thought it would this more relaxed, spacious sounds like something that should have been like the fifth album as opposed to the third album.
It sounds like a lot more mature effort. Yeah, it sounds more like a fifth album.
Yeah.
It's not taking anything away from it.
No, not at all.
It doesn't have like the freshness of the first two records, I don't think. Like you said, it sounds like maybe the fifth record.
Yeah, but it has the beauty in his voice and in the songwriting. That's the thing. It's like a lot of people may not automatically think of the word beauty when they think of Marshall Crenshaw's voice, or whatever. But it is a beautiful instrument because there's innocence and charm, yet, yeah, it's just incredible. And with this album, as I said, this is just something that I think that if he had done another album like the first album and gradually moved into this, it probably would have done better. I mean, I still can't believe when I think about this, I mean, I look at the charts. Remember, we were living through this. We knew what was going on. We knew what was in the charts. We knew that this stuff was not going to go to the top of the charts. But this is the stuff that should have gone to the, into the, at least the top 20 or top 40. And, people probably see these albums in the used bins quite a bit. And don't hesitate to buy them, whether you find them on CD or vinyl, because these are wonderfully beautiful albums. Don't hesitate to buy anything by Marshall Crenshaw unless it says live on it.
Well,
you know me and live albums.
Yeah, but man,
I know
when I was a kid and saw him, that's my gateway though.
No, I know.
They were phenomenal live.
No,
bands.
seeing them live is fantastic. I mean, what a world we had back then with Marshall Crenshaw, and Mitch Easter and Let's Active, Peter Hallsapple, Chris Damey, and the DBs. It was such an exciting time back then. 20 years later, it was Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah. Well, things change. Nothing stays the same.
Yeah, I know.
But anyway, this record, Downtown, I think is a great effort. Not quite up to first two albums. Marshall's songwriting is still great. It's pretty polished. It's very crisp. Some of us may like that, but I like that intimacy of that original band. You know what I mean? That energy, that it's intimate. It's, there's a lot of, God, what do I want to say? Help me. Give me a word. Chocolate. It's a lot of chocolate on those first two records. But anyway, Downtown's a great record.
Yeah.
So after that.
1987.
Okay.
Was it Mary Jean and what, 9 others?
And Mary Jean and 9 others, yeah.
Talk about an album. Well, first off, he's got Graham Mabey on bass on this.
Phenomenal.
And Graham Mabey, great vocalist, great bass player, used to play with the Joe Jackson Band. Yeah. So he's on the first 3 Joe Jackson Band albums. And then I think he continued to play with Joe, whereas the drummer was no longer playing with, or a drummer and guitar player weren't playing.
But Robert Crenshaw's there. He's playing drums on this.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, this is a super, no doubt this is an album where the label just said, okay, we need to make a hit. So there's keyboards on this album, and there's such a variety. You can tell that some of the stuff was recorded more of a rock and roll record. Some of the stuff was the label saying, no, we want this kind of synth sound on this or this kind of stuff. The thing that saves Marshall Crenshaw albums, regardless of production, this is slick 80s production. But what saves it? Oh, and it's slick 80s album covers too. I mean,
love the album cover.
If you were to go out, there's a group called Michael Learns to Rock, and they had they were, I don't know, they're like Dutch or something or German, and they had a bunch of albums, but they had one album in America, and it's basically the same type of album cover, and it came out within a couple of years of this. It was like obviously the same designer, same and it's almost interchangeable. But this album, the thing that saves it is Marshall. You cannot keep Marshall down. You can add keyboards, you can add different types of production, you can add a whole bunch of different stuff, but you can't stop Marshall. Now, I don't think every song on this album is great. I think he does sound a little bit like, oh God, are they really making me do this? But his voice is just shines through. I mean, I think This Is Easy, as it's become a Marshall Crenshaw classic. I think Somebody's Crying is another great song off of this. I mean, this album has a lot of great songs. See, the thing about it though is it's produced by Don Dixon.
I like Don Dixon.
Oh, I love Don Dixon. Praying Mantis. He was a great single by him, and that's what confused me about the sound of the album. Because you would think that Don Dixon would keep it very down to earth, very organic.
Yeah.
But who knows? But it's strange to say. I think this is the least or the lesser of the albums that we've talked about so far. But how can you say that about an album that has, I think, a lot of great songs on it? But production-wise, I think it's, but not Don Dixon's production. That's the whole thing. It's like I say production, but then it's Don Dixon and the keyboards maybe, or maybe the tendency to try to be a little commercial.
I don't have a problem with it. I'm looking at the tracks. Oh, I love this record.
I mean, so do I.
Oh my God.
But I mean, I think that I don't think this is as good as Downtown.
I like this album better than Downtown. We all hear it differently. And
totally.
For some reason, Steve, I like the guitar sounds on here. It might be a bit slicker, but I really dig the songs on this record.
Oh,
and
so
if
do
I'm
I.
pulling them out, I probably pull out this more than Downtown. But I like Downtown too.
Yeah, yeah.
But for some reason, I've always gravitated to this record. I don't know.
I think Marshall sounds better when it's Marshall and not Marshall and production. I thought that the first album was an incredible mix or just allowing Marshall to be Marshall. I thought Field Day, again, great songs, but the production kind of drowned out or kind of took away from Marshall. Downtown, I think, even put Marshall in the spotlight even more. I think this one sort of brings him back just a little bit, you know.
Well, I think, when people reviewed this record back that day, I think that they thought that this was a little bit of a drop off. Is there a drop off?
Here's a theory I have.
It's not a drop off for me.
Right. Here's a theory that I have.
Okay, go ahead.
And for anybody that thinks Marshall Crenshaw is a power pop artist, which neither you or I do, they think this is a drop off because it's not power pop enough. People who understand Marshall Crenshaw, I think, when I say it's the lesser of the four, I'm not saying it's a drop off because the songs are still great. There's just something about it that maybe I didn't connect with. But if you're a power pop fan, you may not find all the elements you want because, again, more modern production. But you got Don Dixon, and Don Dixon's a great producer.
I'm kind of surprised, though, because this is pretty slick for a Don Dixon production.
Yeah.
I always wondered, we've been talking about this, how much did Warner Brothers, were they dropping it on the sessions going, well, Don, we could use a little bit more reverb on here, or, wow, that drum part, wow, it doesn't sound like Phil Collins.
Yeah,
or turn that up a bit.
Or, I like that piano, but I think it would sound better played on a Korg,
Right. But the thing with this record, I don't find that the songwriting has diminished.
No, not at all.
I think if you would have done production like on, hell, even if you brought back Steve Lillywhite, it would have been a different record. But I think the songs are just as strong as anything else he's put out. I think it's the production that we could go back and forth on and go, well, I wish it was a little bit more like this.
Yeah.
The songs are still great. He is a master craftsman of songwriting. He does a version, Peter Case's Steel Strings on here, which is phenomenal.
See,
I can't critique it. But even with this, I love it, even if it's slick, because it's so good.
See, here's another thing that we as critics and fans, and I've said this in some of my videos, and I'm guilty about this, just like anybody else is. We always say, this artist changed. This album isn't as good because it doesn't sound like the first album. The thing is we as fans, as critics, we have to accept an artist's as he or she evolves. And if we want the first Marshall Crenshaw album, if Field Day sounded just like the first album, we'd go, yeah. If Downtown sounded just like the first album, we'd go, oh, God, is he ever going to change? If Mary Jean sounded like the first album, we'd be going, oh, it's just the same old, same old. So you can never please anybody. We're always going to complain. So we have to let the artist evolve. And then it's up to us to decide, do we like this phase of that artist's career? I particularly, like I said, I love Don Dixon producing. I love Marshall Crenshaw songwriting, but there's something on this that sounded like maybe the major label said, hold on, before we release this, you know, that Phil Collins and Philip Bailey duet is really good. I like the sound of the keyboards on that. Can we add this to this? You know, but I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe we could get a remix.
That would be awesome.
Heck, remix Mary Jane.
Yeah,
remix
or Mary
Downtown. I don't.
Or
care.
Mary Jean, the demos album. Show us what it sounded like. Yeah, at its core. Yep, Rock, are you listening?
Yeah. Well, I'd like to see them continue on with this reissue campaign. Don't stop with Field Day. Let's get all these Warner Brothers albums out. Continue on to Life's Too Short. Let's keep it going. So
exactly.
All right, so we're on to 1989, the album Good Evening.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't even have to hold these up, do I? Because you put them up on the screen.
I'll put all the graphics up.
Yeah, that's right. This, I think, suffered the same thing. Bunch of great songs, different approaches in each song musically, but still, I think this doesn't have as many highlights, in my opinion, as the other records. But this sounded like Marshall Crenshaw trying to get out of his Warner Brothers deal. It's like, yeah, I'm still going to write great songs, but there's a lot of other things for me to do. So, you know, let's knock this out and see what happens. But still, Marshall Crenshaw on a bad day is better than a lot of artists on their good days.
This isn't a bad
especially
record
Creed.
at all. Creed. I don't think we've ever mentioned Creed on this channel.
Yeah.
Might get us shut down.
Yeah, I know.
But this record, I kind of look at this as Downtown Part 2.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Because Downtown has all these studio musicians. It's very filled out. And then Mary Jean goes back to just basically, you know, Robert, you know, it goes back to the core band. It's not quite, it's slick, but still there's a lot more air to it. This kind of reminds me of Downtown Part 2.
Does it?
And that's not saying anything bad about it, but this is almost like the record company coming in and going, all right, we're going to do this. We're going to make one last effort. Because this was the last album in his catalog, you know, first contract. We're going to throw in the kitchen sink and see what happens. Problem is, well, there's no problem here. I think it just didn't catch on, ended up in the cutout bins. It's not the first album. People wanted more of the first album, I'm assuming. But I think it's a wonderful record, and I think all the songs are killer. It just didn't happen, you know. I think from 82, you know, you get here, what's this, 89?
Yeah.
Give it a shot. You know, it's a good record. It's just never going to really take off for poor Marshall, you know.
Yeah, again, as you know, my whole feeling about, you know, like the Mary Jean album. Now this, this kind of sounds like it has songs for Mary Jean and Downtown. It's like a mixture. Because you do have more contemporary 1989 production, then you have more rootsy based stuff as well. I think that, like I said, the songs, I mean, look, when you really listen to Marshall Crenshaw and you hear these chord changes and you hear that voice and you hear these harmonies, you can't help but love it, because when we talked about going back and covering the Warner Brothers years, a couple of years ago, I did a CD junkie on my channel on Marshall Crenshaw, and I loved going through it and listening to it all. And then I went back to just listen to these albums again, and it changed my whole attitude for the day, because the stuff is pure magic. Like I said, even on his worst days, he's a lot better than most artists on this. But I don't even like to use the word worst, because there's nothing that's worst about this. This is just a great artist. It may not have been as immediate. See, that's the thing too. Marshall Crenshaw was still writing these great songs, but the first album, it was immediate. It's like the first listen, you're going, yeah, and you're singing along by the end of the chorus. With like these last two albums, the songs sort of revealed themselves after a listen or two. You had to really, or actually 2 or 3 listens, you had to really listen to them, and then they really got their claws into you. They stuck their talons in your skull and wouldn't let go. And that's kind of how I feel about it. The songwriting was still great, but just less immediate.
You're right. Well, there's a lot more collaboration on this record too.
Yeah.
You've got, outside songwriters. It's the typical thing. Warner Brothers is probably going, well, yeah, Marsh, we know you can write songs, but we probably need to get some people in here that.
Warner Brothers were going, oh, no. Marshall, I'm sure you're going to love this guy. I mean, he co-wrote The Glory of Love with Peter Cetera.
But still, how do you feel about...
I'm not saying he worked with that guy or girl.
Right, but how do you feel about, David Kirschenbaum and him being the producer of this album? I mean, I don't know. You get, you got T-Bone Burnett. How much control did Marshall have anymore? Still great records, but I just think that the record company had a big hand in all these.
Yeah.
And David Kirschenbaum, great producer, but I don't know.
But David Kirschenbaum
who's really steering the ship on these records? I don't.
Yeah, I mean, David Kirschenbaum produced like lots of different types of stuff. He produced the first couple Joe Jackson albums. Mm-hmm. I think he produced the third Any Trouble album when they went sort of keyboardy, synthy, and that was 82, 83, 84, or 82, 83. And then of course, so and he produced other stuff. So he didn't have one style. You always knew that when Tony Visconti was doing something in the 80s, it was going to have a certain everything in the kitchen sink production. You knew that Steve Lillywhite was going to have sort of the same type of thing, but a different approach than Visconti. Like, Visconti with Boomtown Rats and things like that. It was like big, bold, and bombastic. David Kirschenbaum seemed to be more compact. Mm-hmm. But then each project that I know that he worked on was different from the last,
Yeah. I don't have a problem with this record either. Maybe I'm a true fan because I tend to take in whatever Marshall gives me.
Or maybe you're
for me to critique it.
You're sycophant.
Maybe I am. I'm a big production guy. Everything's got to check the right box for it to be great. And with Marshall, he's just such a brilliant artist. I'm sorry, I sound like a big fanboy. All these records, I could not live without them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was saying, well, Downtown's not quite my favorite. Well, yeah, but they have to land someplace. Field Day and the Debut, of course, I love that. I love the sound of them. I love the band. I just love just them playing.
Yeah, and the thing about it is album or songs off of Downtown, Mary Jane, and Good Evening.
Yeah.
I think rub shoulders with songs off the first two albums.
100%.
Just as great. Production's a little bit different. And again, like I said, and I think just me going back and re-listening to them without, because when you're there and you're living through it, there's a lot of things going on in your life, and you're following this artist going through their career. And what you remember was that feeling they gave you the first time you heard Cynical Girl or Someday Some Way or whatever. So that's your thing. So, you may be going like, well, somebody's crying. It doesn't give me, or it's great, but it's not like first up. No, it is. This is the whole thing. It's just that songwriter evolves, matures,
Mm-hmm.
and they're writing these glorious melodies. Like I said, with me, sometimes the productions, but as a songwriter, as a singer, the harmonies, people, you just can't touch Marshall Crenshaw.
No,
There are very, very few artists out there that are on that level still to this day.
I agree 100%.
Now,
Go ahead.
just in case somebody doesn't want to invest in all the catalog, I say do it. And I say pick up whatever you can in the used bins. Without a doubt, new. Order the Yep Rock remasters of the self-titled album Field Day. Without a doubt. You can't get Downtown Mary Jean or Good Evening new.
No, they've been out of print.
Yeah, they've been out of print. But this is a compilation. I believe it's also out of print. Came out on Rhino called This Is Easy. And this covers everything. And it does have You're My Favorite Waste of Time on it. And it has some other rarities. And I think it goes a little bit further than that, too. And then there's also a 2 CD set called The Definitive Hop Collection, which covers this and more, or the Warner Brothers stuff and more.
Yeah.
So that's also a nice one to get as well. And then get the Robert Crenshaw albums, and then all the other Marshall Crenshaw albums, and hell, while you're out there, get all the Marshall Tucker albums too.
Well, I almost feel like we need to do a second show dealing with that other later career. There's not that much. Well, there is.
But yeah, I mean, we just
I'm looking at the catalog, see if I'm missing something. And I think the only one that I'm missing is Miracle of Science. I've heard it.
There was a reissue of Miracle of Science from like 2 or 3 years ago.
And
So
that got good reviews.
Yeah.
Life's Too Short got great reviews.
yeah,
I feel like we almost need like a part 2, like in a month. Like finish out the catalog. What's your thoughts?
yeah, then we'll do it.
Okay. Well, I feel like we're stopping short. I feel like we really need to. Let's do part 2.
Yeah, he's definitely an artist that deserves it. But like I said, you can't cover it in an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. You can't. There's just no way.
But anyway, we highly recommend any of these Warner Brothers albums.
Yeah.
Mary Jane didn't Wounded Bird bring those out? I think they're out of print again though.
Yeah. Wounded Bird did
put out all those Good Evening and Mary Jane and Downtown. But I think they were straight from what I've read. I've never heard them. They were just clones of the original Warner Brothers CDs.
Yes, because the Warner Brothers ones were deleted.
Yeah. And nothing wrong with the Warner Brothers CDs. They're not brick walled. They all sound great. Get them if you can find them. Highly recommended. Steve, anything else you need to say before we wrap this dog up?
Well, since we mentioned it, definitely check out woundedbird.com. They might have something still in print, but they're a great reissue label. Them, Omnivore, Cherry Red, lots of.
Yeah.
We could go on and on and on about this stuff. But Yep Rock.
Let's hope that they continue on with the remaster campaign. I hope Yep Rock is listening.
Well, you know what I'm hoping? I'm kind of hoping that Marshall puts out a new record.
Yeah, when was the last one?
It's been a few years.
Jagland was like 2009. Grab the Next Train.
There was an EPs or something that came out.
I'm not sure what year that came out.
I mean, it's been a while.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe he'll do something. He still tours.
Yep. Like I said, my friend Derek Anderson is currently playing bass for him. And I think Fernando Perdomo is playing with him. And Fernando's a super talented guy.
So, Steve, what's coming up on your channel on Schnee TV real quick?
Well, I have a super special Lonnie Flower special that's coming up. And that's an episode of Schnee TV. And then also episode 7 of Schnee TV is coming. And then I've got CD Junkies on My Life Story, and not My Life Story, but the group My Life Story. And, more focuses on the albums from 1979 or albums from the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
it just depends on when I wake up that morning, what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Now, what about you?
What's coming up here?
You got something every day, man.
Well, there's something every day.
Yeah.
Yesterday, George Lamy was on the channel, and we did. I've got to work on that show. We looked at the catalog of Living Color, and then after that, what was the other show I did?
Jim Carrey's old band.
Yeah. Well, I did kept calling it In Living Color a couple of times during the show because you can't. In fact, George was saying, well, there was some kind of lawsuit that was brought up.
Oh, was there?
Yeah, I think it might have been settled out of court about that.
Okay.
So we looked at Living Color. That was a good show. And then, I don't know, there's always something. I've got some shows that I need to get edited.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I was doing so many live shows. I thought, geez, I better just like calm down. They're probably tired of live shows and let's just do it the old way.
Yeah. Well, I've got something that's brewing that might be a live show, but I will be able to discuss that at a later date. Or actually, I'll discuss it when we go offline. I forgot to tell you about it.
Sure. All right. Well, I want to thank Steve Schnee for coming on tonight, talking a little Marshall Crenshaw. We will be back next month. We will do a part 2 and look at the later catalog by Marshall and give you our thoughts on those. And we'll leave it at that. But the Warner Brothers era, go out, seek it out. Please do yourself a favor and check out the catalog of Marshall Crenshaw.
Definitely.
All right, Steve. We'll see you next month. Everybody have a good one and keep it clean, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks, Grant.
Got it.
Thank you, everybody.